Hey everybody, welcome to my special Las Vegas live broadcast. I hope you are ready for some fun. I will give you a quick disclaimer that we do have the producer here nearing nap time. So if you hear her screaming from the remote control room, that's why. And also, my technical director / husband is taking care of her. So we should have at least a little bit of time to go over this important topic. And why is it important? Okay. So recently, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled that YouTubers are not news media legally, okay? And what that means is that the special privileges, basically, that's what they consider them, but someone might argue they're rights and they shouldn't be special privileges. I'm sure our guests would argue that. Means that you get certain access to public records that the average person doesn't get. And this includes things like personal information about government employees, like date of birth, okay? And so right now, the law is that you have to be news media to access some of these specific public records that the average person is not allowed. Now, our guest today, Brian Green, is the one who filed suit to obtain those records. We're going to talk about why. He's going to be in the stream in a second. He and then Ford Fischer are also in my virtual green room right now. I'm going to bring him in a second. Ford is an independent journalist who runs News to Share, and you've probably seen him on my channel before. He's got a lot to say about this ruling and what that means for people like himself and me, folks who are trying to do work that, for instance, I used to do under the brand of a corporate newsroom. And now I'm trying to do, I do a lot of commentary now, but say I wanted to file a public record request for my YouTube channel. The only difference between me now and me then is the fact that I don't have a major news corporation behind me anymore, but I'm still the same person. So what does this mean for independent journalism? In a lot of ways, independent journalism is doing better, forward-thinking journalism than the corporate news is, right? And so for them to be labeled not news media is an interesting ruling. And so we're going to talk all about it. Before I bring in my guests, just a quick order of business. There are links in the description for how you can support my work on other platforms. If you are watching this on YouTube, which you probably are, you may be watching it on ODYSEE, but the full video will also be on ROKFIN and on Locals. And for my Patreon community too, you'll get a link as well. But just throwing that out there because this video is likely not going to get ripped, but a lot of others do. And so I'm just trying to move people over to the other platforms because I think, this is just, it's starting to get to the point where there may be a time where I won't even have the chance to move you over to say, hey, I just got booted from YouTube, right? And then the chance will be over. So just order of business, check out those other platforms. If you can, even if you still watch on YouTube for now, make sure that you're linked to one of those other platforms, okay? All right, so let's bring in Ford Fischer, News to Share, and then we got Brian Green. Brian, you run Liberty's, Liberty's Champion is the name of your YouTube channel. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay, so let's start with you, if you don't mind. I'm going to let's just give us kind of the brief rundown of what led to your public records request. And as you're talking, I'm going to go to that video of you in the courthouse because I think, right, that's where this started. You were entering the courthouse, and then the security wanted to check your briefcase, and then it led to you ending up in jail, right? And so why don't take us through that, if you don't mind.
Well, actually, I had already gone through the security and had been checked. And a friend of mine who was doing some camera work came along with me, and they were checking through his gear. And after he'd gone through, they wanted to check it again. And I had simply asked what law there was that would allow them to look through his stuff because it was because Article 1, Section 10 guarantees the right to open courts. And so they called the police over, and that gentleman right there. And when I asked him, he got rather upset. He came around and stood next to me, and then he said, "Get out of my way!" Pushed me to the floor.
Okay, hang on. Let me play that real fast before we get to that part. So, but just a point of clarification that I was curious about. So I heard them saying, we want to check your briefcase to see what's inside it. And you were saying something like, I will assist with that. And they're like, no, you won't assist with that. We want to know. you know, you could have something dangerous in there, and you're like, I don't. And then you guys were kind of going back and forth. From his perspective, it sounded like at the beginning that he just wanted to make sure that you weren't carrying something into the courthouse that could be dangerous. Am I missing something there?
Yeah, that's not how it happened at all. He never wanted to look through my bag or anything at all. As a matter of fact, in the video, you can hear him asking them if I had gone through security, and they told him yes.
Okay. Well, at the beginning of the video, I heard that exchange happening.
Yeah, that's because that's what he was talking to, or I believe that was my friend talking to either him or the security person there. That wasn't me. I'd already gone through.
Okay, so your friend was the one that had the issue where they wanted to search the briefcase.
Yes, it wasn't me.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Okay, so let's watch this. So this is you, and this is the Pierce County Courthouse, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not free here.
This is not a public place.
So I'm not gonna argue with you. Do you want to go or you want to go? I don't have time to stay and argue with you.
So you're going to show a law instead, right?
Yeah, we're not going
to show a law. You're just going to be in here enforcing no law. Is that what you're doing?
Did I tell you I'm not going to debate?
Well, show the law, because that's a requirement of yours. Now.
Waiting. You can leave.
I don't have to leave. You have to show nature and cause, and I demand you show it right now.
Let's go.
No, I'm not leaving. This is a public place. You can't deny me access to the court.
Security already? Yeah. Are you through security? Back. What in the hell are you doing? You are too close to me. Back up.
Hey, you are out of line.
Okay, so that's what happened, right?
That's right.
Okay. So I just wanted to show people that, because that surprised me when I saw that as well. So then what happens after that, Brian?
Well, after that, he asked me if I'm going to leave, and I had business there in the courthouse. I had come there because there was something going on with a friend of mine and his estate, which was another whole crooked thing with the judiciary. But and also I had a parking ticket, so I was there to pay my parking ticket and to put in an affidavit on his behalf for his case. And so after this incident happened, you know, because I needed to put that stuff in, of course, you know, there's time limit on all this stuff. He arrested me and didn't allow me to do my business in there. Took me down to the jailhouse, and they put me in the jail there, and I wouldn't sign any of their paperwork. So when I wouldn't sign any of their paperwork, they took me, about 5 of them, and threw me in a cold cell. It was November, right around Thanksgiving, and they stripped me of all my clothes. They said if I wasn't going to sign, then you know, they were going to take all my clothes and stick me. They were going to basically make me sign by taking my clothes and putting me in a cold place. Anyway, they did that, and I have a condition, gastroparesis, and so I can't like eat regular food and stuff, and I have a real problem with it. It's a very serious malady. But anyway, they wouldn't give me any medical care, and when they finally came in and gave me some clothes, one of the women guards came in and gave me like a smock, you know, a thin smock. Anyway, but it was terrible. They finally let me out. They wouldn't let me sign under duress either. And I had to wait until the next shift. And when the next shift came in, the guy that was in charge there let me sign out under duress. And then they put me through like 9 months of court cases. And it's funny because the prosecution actually took my video, this video that you're looking at, and they submitted it as evidence against me. So they took the exculpatory evidence and they tried to use it as evidence against me.
What did they charge you with?
Not resisting.
Obstruction, or was it disorderly conduct? I heard them say something like that.
No, it was obstruction. And what's so funny about that is that you cannot verbally obstruct, and they knew that. So it was a bogus, false charge anyway.
And has that charge ultimately been dropped, or are you still facing it?
They dropped it. They dropped it after 9 months.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, and it's in there that they put in there that they had the exculpatory evidence in the ruling, and that you can't verbally obstruct as to the Supreme Court decision.
So how did this lead you to filing the records request for the information that you were seeking? Like,
well,
you should explain to people what it was that you wanted to know and why.
Well, I wanted to see who these torturers were. I mean, these people, they're not supposed to be doing this stuff. None of these people are supposed to be doing any of this. This is way outside of their scope of employment, and we're paying for them. So I wanted to basically show who these people are that might be a danger to the citizenry when they go inside the county city building there in Tacoma. I think that's news.
You're talking about the identity of the police officers who sort of accosted you there?
Yes, that one, and the well, as a matter of fact, I ended up suing the county on his record. He had a disciplinary record they tried to hide that was 364 pages long, and it featured dereliction of duty and domestic violence. So wow. There was, yeah, and then they tried to hide the, then I sued them again, and I won both these cases. They settled with me. And another one, they tried to hide the complaint that I made against him. The sheriff himself tried to hide the complaint that I made against him. And so, I mean, it was pretty incredible, the whole thing. And it turned out that I couldn't sue him. I tried to sue on my civil rights, but no one would take the case because I found out that just about every attorney in this entire area does some sort of work for Pierce County and had a conflict of interest. So it was absolutely insane. I had to, when I finally got someone to take the case in the end, I did it all myself up until the end. They dropped the case within a day after she said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Basically, they dropped it immediately.
And so
it was
Brian,
just totally bogus. And then the thing, yes.
What? So did you want the names in order to file suit? Why did you, like, what were you going to do with the information?
Well, I did want to file suit, but that's but the thing is that yes, I wanted all those names, and the thing I basically wanted their photographs mostly, you know. And it's interesting because they never tried to show who they are. Okay, I mean, so to put on your YouTube channel, is that what you were planning to do? Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's funny because, and I asked for their ID cards also, which are not restricted. So they didn't give me any of that. I've asked for ID cards many times now, and they're not restricted under the Public Records Act, but the judges are construing it so, because they, well, from my experience, the judges despise open government. They've exempted themselves from it with GR 31.1. You can't get judges' communications or anything like that. And every time they're there to help the government hide records. As you know, I mean, I think this is particularly egregious, to tell you the truth, because this is something that's a protected right. And as far as I know, converting a protected right into a privilege is a crime. So I don't know why they would do that.
And so was their sole argument that they actually sort of accepted in the end that the only reason that you shouldn't get those things is because essentially you're not a corporate journalist? I mean, I think that was kind of the distinction that caused it to enter like my sort of domain when I found that Reclaim the Net story and so forth was the reasoning of that state Supreme Court case. I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, and I was actually going to bring that up. Well, this is the article that I originally saw too, but I'm trying to bring up the actual ruling because at the end of the day, I mean, I was going to say that I haven't talked to Pierce County, and I honestly haven't found their explanation of that even incident. So I don't know what they would say, about your allegations about what happened. But at the end of the day, it's kind of irrelevant because it didn't seem to, at least reading the ruling, I didn't see that even came into play in the judge's decision. The judge's decision was solely based on what determines someone a news media outlet versus just a person. And it really seems to come down to whether you have a corporate license in the state and you have employees. They were using the definition for the SHIELD law. So, if people aren't aware of that, it's a law that allows or protects, I guess, journalists from having to hand over their sources. So there's a definition for what is a journalist or a news media organization for the SHIELD law that means that you don't have to then hand over your sources. And they were using that definition for you, whether you're a news media outlet and should be able to have the rights to obtain that information. That's what I understood anyway. So go ahead, Brian.
Well, that's the whole problem here. I mean, they never cited once to the First Amendment or Article 1, Section 5 of the Washington State Constitution. I think it's Section 5. You know, I've got a right, and rights are not permissive. Rights are inherent. So I don't understand at all why they would even try to write such a thing or uphold anything like that. I mean, and if I don't have the right to find out information, I clearly don't have the right to speak. You know, I'm barred from speaking from what I can't know, I would think. So I think that's I think it's really dangerous. Another thing that I find this is, you see that these courts work off of definitions. So they haven't had a definition for this yet that they can work off of. And they say that they're going to use this. This is for purposes of the Public Records Act. But as you just said, they cited to the you know, the protection of press protection, you know, for this thing. So they're going to go. You know, now people aren't going to be able to go in and film in court, you know, and they won't have the freedom to do a lot of things because, I mark my words, these entities, these prosecutors and these judges are going to use this against people, against independent media, especially since independent media is really keen on exposing these type of folks. I don't think they really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting case because I'll show you guys here. Let's go back to this. So this is what this says: any newspaper, magazine, or other periodical, book, publisher, news agency, wire service, radio or television station or network, cable or satellite station or network, or audiovisual production company, or any entity that is in the regular business of news gathering and disseminating news or information to the public by any means, including but not limited to print, broadcast, photographic, mechanical, internet, electronic distribution. Any person who is or has been employee, agent, or independent contractor of any entity listed in A of this subsection, or has been engaged in bona fide news gathering for such entity and who obtained or prepared the news or information that is sought while serving in the capacity, or any parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of the entities listed in A or B of the subsection, the extent that subpoena or other compulsory process seeks news or information described in subsection. So they put the burden of proof on you to explain why you were. That's what I read through this, right? That they were like, you have the burden of proof to prove that you are a news media organization. And the summary of it seemed like, just reading it again, not an attorney, that they were saying, you know, you don't have any employees, you don't have an LLC, and they're trying to make a differentiation. Because I read in this that they were like, because then anyone would be a journalist, you know, that they literally said that, like, anyone would be news media if we let this guy be news media. So
and they say that as if that would be a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, so let me play devil's advocate for a second. And
sure.
Ford, I'm just curious what you think about this, because we do have an issue right now with, like, the whole issue, you know, the punishment of the doxing crowd, right? And like, well, we don't like you, so here's your address and here's your phone number and your and who you are. We don't like you, and people do that on all sides. So do you see any concern, like if they say, well, if we do just let every person have this personal information on people, is there a concern that people are going to just start publishing left and right on the internet, date of birth, where you work, where you live, all that stuff? Or do you think that should be allowed? Do you see any concern there?
I mean, it kind of reminds. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, first of all, that's never happened. That's never happened, and these people have never showed this. That was one of our arguments. They've never showed that anyone has ever used the Public Records Act to go after any public servant or any of these police or anything like that. You know, the other thing is that the law states in the Public Records Act that these things are to be construed broadly in favor of disclosure. So that looks like what you just read there about what is news media looks pretty broad, and by narrow they had to narrowly construe it to come up with their ruling. Go
ahead, Ford.
I was going to say it reminds me of the Thomas Jefferson quote, "I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery." Not that the irony is lost on me of Thomas Jefferson being a slave owner and saying that, but with that being aside, I think that honestly, the point that I would say there is that if their concern is what somebody could do with that which the free media is entitled to use, they would either have to reform the law so that it's all the media or none of it, or have some other protection against doxing or like whatever else it is. But I don't think that the solution is attempting to make a distinction whereby they get to say certain people are media and certain people aren't, because like we said, that would apply to so many other areas where it could be a problem. Right. I think that basically citizen journalism can range all the way from somebody with, a YouTube channel who's established themselves basically as a full-time journalist who doesn't have a corporation, all the way down to somebody who happens to see something newsworthy and they start recording on their phone. And even if that person is a construction worker, they're effectively doing those things that a journalist does when they engage in the act of recording. And it also, I think, this sort of misses the relationship between the independent journalist and the wider news media, right? So, like, I did incorporate News to Share. I'm a one-person news agency that then I hire freelancers, and so I have a number of people who sort of work for me, and therefore would, I guess, be under this definition. But I worked for about the first year without being incorporated. And during that time, our content was used on the Today Show and the O'Reilly Factor, which was still a thing at the time. And right, so if someone told me that I wasn't entitled to press freedom, while I at the same time was literally contributing to CBS and Fox News in an indirect, but in a way, right, my content was of newsworthy usefulness to them, that wouldn't have been fair. Right. And so I would not want a police officer to say, actually, the First Amendment doesn't apply to you today because you don't have an LLC. Like, hi, I'm filming you. Hi, I'd like to see your paperwork. I don't think that can work. I don't think that that's sort of a sustainable model. And so my guess is that they probably thought, oh, this is such sort of a narrow ruling on sort of one application that it's not going to like hurt things more widely. But I think it's a really dangerous business to be having the government set a definition for news media. In Washington, D.C. in 2014, there was a similar issue where D.C. police actually used to issue press passes. And with the advent of cell phones and so forth, the police stopped issuing press passes on the basis that now everybody is media, and so everybody should be entitled to those protections. Unfortunately, I think that the result of that to some extent is that the police get to say nobody has it, and therefore nobody's entitled to them. But at least in theory, at least in their actual explanation of why they stopped issuing them, they said it's because everybody is entitled. So the Washington, D.C. police seem to kind of understand that. It seems like the Washington state authorities, be it the Supreme Court or, all the way down at the courthouse security level, seem to be kind of, going the opposite direction. You're not media unless you can prove you are through some other mechanism.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things that I do on my channel, if you ever get a chance to take a look, it shows judges breaking the law and violating precedent, violating court rules. Doing everything that they're not supposed to be doing. And I think that that's very embarrassing to the courts. And it didn't win me any favors. I didn't believe, by the way, that I was going to win this case because the Supreme Court puts out these advisories. And an advisory they put out, I think it was a couple of years ago now, said that people that aren't part of the mainstream media are not allowed to be in under General Rule 16, which is when you have to ask to be, the press has to ask to film in court under GR 16. And so they did an advisory that said that those people didn't have to be let in. So as if they didn't recognize that, I figured that they probably weren't going to rule very well on this case.
Have you considered making Liberty's Champion LLC and then just filing the same thing again to see if they try to come up with a new excuse?
Well, I thought about that, but this is the thing is that, I didn't get into this to make money or anything like that. I got into this to expose corruption because I saw so much corruption over in the courthouse. After my case, I couldn't believe what they had done for asking a question, really. which is my right to ask a question like that. I mean, I wasn't hurting anyone by asking that question. And so I don't know. And since then, I've wanted to expose this terribly corrupt system that we have that's totally unaccountable. So that's why I've been doing it. But I've been considering going ahead and incorporating and going through with it, to become, I guess, legitimate in some way, I guess.
It would be interesting to see them move the goalposts, because at least in theory, they have to proclaim objectivity as they decide their ruling. And it seems like, I mean, honestly, given the definition that Allison pulled up earlier, it seemed like they probably had to really stretch it to say that, we only view it as incorporated bodies that do these things. I mean, but it looks like I haven't really looked at your YouTube channel, but I mean, it looks like you're doing the stuff of reporting. You have a specific, micro niche focus, and you have a way that you present it. They could perhaps accuse you of some kind of bias or something, but it's not the job of the government to evaluate, whether your media is good or not, right? Like the state can't say that.
Well, I'm worried. Yeah. They're
not supposed to legally, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I worry that they're going to try to conflate these things into crimes. I went and I filmed in the Court of Appeals last year, and it wasn't in the actual court, so you don't have to. It was just in the administration area, and a judge basically went after me, wrote me a letter that if I kept on doing that, even though there's no law against it at all, that basically I was committing a crime. So they will take these things, that they'll piecemeal them, the judges and the prosecutors, and they will conflate them into crimes. Mark my words.
It was funny to me to read some of the section of the ruling where they're like, the woman who was originally going back and forth with you about the records request determining whether you should be a news media organization and have access to him was like, and he wrote me from his email address, which was for his band. Like that was one of the things that was discrediting you, that you have a band and that your email address was like Brian Green, or whatever. I won't give it out, but that, it had to do with your band. Like that was like, well, he can't be a news media because he has a band, or whatever. Or like it was his, if you had just if your Gmail or your Hotmail or Proton Mail or whatever was like, Brian Green is an independent journalist at proton.com or whatever, then maybe you would have had a chance. But because it had something to do with you having a band, then you were just, it's always those musicians, man. You just can't trust them. You can't trust them with public records requests.
How do they know it's not my news gathering band? They just made that assumption.
And I mean, in all seriousness, there are music reporters. I'm quite friendly with a person who covers the punk rock scene, and sometimes that overlaps into the political world. And if some punk rocker got arrested and was put in a courthouse, and NBC4 was allowed to do something at that same courthouse, I wouldn't want her to not be able to cover that event the same way NBC does, because she's got a nose ring and an email address that whatever has a peace symbol in it or something. I'm it's a real example, but I'm half making up the problem they could make. But I mean, beat reporters are going to have different approaches, and many of them are going to be part-time, whatever, right? And so the government should not be able to pick apart reasons why somebody doesn't count.
Right.
I think you can let the viewer decide that, whether a viewer trusts somebody for some reason or another, right? I mean, but that's sort of the free market. It's not up to the state to say who's media and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Duke University, their journalism department wrote us an amicus for this particular case. So what about student journalists?
I didn't see the amicus from RTDNA, but what did they say? That's the Murrow Awards, right? So what were they in support of your cause?
That from the no, which one was that?
Radio, television. I always get.
Oh no! They were against me, and I find that interesting.
Okay. No.
Yeah, they were against me. They said if I wasn't registered, I wasn't news media.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know that people, the organization representing Murrow doesn't think that you're a journalist. I guess in some way it doesn't surprise me that you would have legacy or institutional or groups that would say, no, I mean, it's funny. A friend of mine who's been on the channel a couple of times, we were talking about this and he was like, I don't know. I have this thing about just like anyone can be a journalist. And I'm like, okay, but that's your thing. But you really want the government to be the one that's making that determination. I mean, you get to have your own opinion. That's fine. But like having the government deciding for us that a corporate, licensed, basically a group that they can cut off, they can give you your license or take away your license. So someone they can control, that's going to be news media. And to me, it seems like it just boils down to surveillance control, like some wing of the government keeping tabs on you, because they just don't, they can't, there's no, not necessarily saying that they're, Pierce County's calling up my old newsroom in Seattle and saying, hey, run this, or don't talk about Brian. But there is an element, I think, of control when you have a business, in a particular state, you file with them, all that stuff. It is a measure of their keeping tabs on you, in my opinion, and in whatever level you may believe that to be. And if you don't have that, and maybe it just comes out of money, I don't know, paying taxes, but yeah. To me, there's that little bit of probably control, and then there also is just this old school way of thinking about what news media is, which is hilarious too, because what are all of the legacy media outlets doing now? They're all going to YouTube, and now basically YouTube is saying, I remember watching Susan Wojcicki's latest commentary for the World Economic Forum, and she's like, we see ourselves as the future platform for media companies. And she was I remember her specifically saying media companies. And I was like, that's very interesting. She's not saying like independent creators or whatever, and kind of went after, sort of threw under the bus the person in their basement, as she said, that is a little bit less trustworthy or maybe very untrustworthy compared to the corporate news. But she said that, that this is like for media companies. And so it does feel like, I don't know, that's like moving in that direction, even though there was a real obvious value to the independent voice. Otherwise, a place like, a platform like YouTube would never have grown. And now it's kind of morphing into this other thing. And your case, I don't know what that says for the rest of us. I'm curious where this goes. Are you going to fight it? Can you fight it? Is this the end of the road?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, my attorney, I think he's about had it. He's funny. He comes from another state. And he, after doing about 3 years of public records cases, he is out because they, like I said, they don't follow the law, any precedent. They're completely unaccountable, and they make sure that you lose if you're going against counties, especially. They really favor them, and even though the cases are righteous, they'll shoot them down, and they'll drag you through the appeals courts and give all kinds of crazy decisions. And the funny thing is that the Supreme Court most of the time won't listen to cases that get shot down in the courts of appeal. So that's the end of those cases there. And I believe this is probably the end of this case. If I had someone that wanted to take this case to like the Supreme Court of the United States, I would take it there, because I think that was rotten, and I do think that it's going to be really bad for journalists, independent journalists in this state. I really think it's going to be bad, because I fear for the way that they would use this precedent, honestly.
I wanted to just bring up that there was this politician who y'all might remember named Donald Trump, who referred to a lot of the news media very frequently as fake news. And while I understand that there's some level of sarcasm in that he's being cheeky, or that it's part of his brand, and and so forth, that did actually escalate to the point where when there was a small disagreement between Jim Acosta and some intern or something over the microphone, that Trump effectively tried to ban CNN from the White House. And the rest of the media basically stood in solidarity with Jim Acosta and said that you have to have clear, specific, rules in order to ban him and whatever. And Jim Acosta basically got the position back. But I would sort of suggest that if you wouldn't want an aspect of government such as Donald Trump deciding who is media and who is not for the purposes of press protection, you shouldn't want any other governing body to be able to do so, right? I mean, it's a dangerous precedent, and we have, I think, like the calling people fake news thing is probably kind of a crude and imprecise version of the problem we're talking about. But imagine if he actually had the weight of a court behind him when he says that. Right. So I would very much err on the side of, like we said at the beginning, dangerous liberty, right? Err on the side of giving journalists freedom. And if you have specific rules that apply to the entire public that you say, oh, nobody's allowed to film in this room or no, whatever, then you can talk about that. But I think nitpicking the difference between press and authorizing the government to choose that is a really dangerous path. And it's a power that will always horseshoe around and hurt the people who you think it's going to help.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and to your point, Brian, like what this definition could be used to either protect or, inverse, like you were saying, Ford, the protections that an individual citizen acting as a journalist could then lose based on a ruling like this, and how that could be, you could see all kinds of scenarios where that could be really dangerous for just freedom of, free flow of information. I did want to just address a couple quick comments. So wait, no such thing as a freelance journalist in Washington State. No. So you can be a freelance journalist, and you guys step in if I say this wrong, but the point of this case was that there's certain information that the average person can't get in a public records request, including personal information about government employees. And so the news media can get that information. But what is the definition of a news media? So if a freelance journalist is working for a corporate outlet and they file under that corporate outlet, then they can get the information. But if the freelance journalist files under themselves and they don't have a business, then they can't get the information. So there are freelance journalists. We're talking about specific information that people can't get unless they're considered to be news media. And then Dwight Schrute, I'm sure it's not really the Dwight Schrute from The Office, but I would love it if it were. Okay, I don't feel like I'm getting the whole story here. You went through security, but they stopped you again. Why? Honestly, we don't have to. I mean, we can't. If you want to talk about that again, you can, Brian. But I just want everybody to be clear that that was just what led Brian to file the request. The actual determination for this court case had nothing to do with whether he did or did not break a law. The charges were dropped, but that wasn't what determined the judge's ruling for the Washington Supreme Court. It was simply whether he met their parameters of what a news media outlet is. And so we talked about what led up to his public records request, but that incident itself did not come into play into the ruling. It was simply that Brian, has a YouTube channel and doesn't have a registered, corporate news organization. And so they determined that he's not news media, thereby setting a precedent for others like myself or Ford, who would say maybe want to do a similar public records request in Washington and would be denied. So I get that right?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think, I don't have a ton more to ask about other than just, I'm curious if you guys have any just closing thoughts on the issue, where it goes from here. And I don't know if I'm guessing this is Washington, but I haven't researched if this, what this is looked at on a federal level. I don't even know what the federal government rules are.
I mean, I guess I would just say, like, in my opinion, the federal government's for the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which is federal law, I would say should basically overrule it. Like my interpretation of the First Amendment is that government should not be able to define press rights away. So if the state of Washington is going to attach freedom of information requests to press freedom, they should not be able to define somebody out of being a journalist. So like I said, I operated from 2014 to 2015, not as a corporation, and then I incorporated, but nothing about my work changed. I don't think I became a journalist on the day that I incorporated my news agency. And so there are many people who might choose not to do so. I mean, to people who might be listening from a different political persuasion, right? Like a leftist news outlet may decide that they are against corporations, right? They want to be some kind of journalism collective, right? Or something where they don't pay people and they don't have a CEO. They just collectivize, whatever. I've heard of nonprofit newsrooms which are still incorporated, but for example, if those people chose to, sort of be an informal collective, they would still be entitled to, whatever protections the press get, in my opinion. And it seems that the state of Washington would deny them on that basis. So the expectation that you register yourself with the government as a corporation is just absolutely the wrong standard to define what a journalist is or isn't.
Right. I don't believe there should be an economic test either to whether you're a journalist. This First Amendment doesn't allow for that.
Right, your journalism might not be profitable. Right, you might not incorporate because you're not making any revenue. It's a really good point. If you had a non-monetized YouTube channel where you're working somewhere completely else as your income, and then you have a YouTube channel where you do journalism for free as a public service, no one should be able to tell you anything else.
Yeah, if you go back to the founding fathers, were they making money off their printing presses out of their garages to tell on the government for the evil stuff they were doing at the time to get people to change it? I doubt it. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. They were probably printing on paper that they hadn't paid tax on.
All right. Sorry, Thomas Paine. You'll have to make a Common Sense LLC in order to keep that printing press going.
Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of funny. Like, if you think about the history behind all of this and what they would think about this decision, which isn't, I don't know. I guess, so real fast, everybody, there is a link for that original YouTube video in the description of this. So if you want to watch that incident at the courthouse, you can watch. It's 7 minutes long. Brian, I guess there's a couple more questions about just clarifying. Can you just one more time? Just, sure. Even though I did preface it, like, this is not, it didn't come into the case, for determining you're not a news media outlet, but just give us one more summary of what led up to that.
About what happened at the courthouse?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was going there to submit some paperwork for a friend of mine's case and to pay a not a traffic ticket, a parking ticket. Mm-hmm. And I had come through with a friend of mine, and we always film when we go into any public building or speak with any public official. I never don't do that. So anyway, we came into the courthouse, and they've got their checkpoint there. And so I had gone through already, and I was waiting on the other side, and my friend was coming through, and he had gone through once, and they were messing with his stuff. They wanted him to dump out his bag. And so he started arguing with them. And I just asked, I said, well, where's the law that says that you folks can do this? Because Article 1, Section 10 of the Washington State Constitution says you can't. We have a right to open court. And what is this checkpoint? Anyway, so they called the police, and when the deputy came, I kept asking the police officer what the law was, and he wouldn't answer me. And so he got upset and came around, and I asked him again, and he stood next to me. I had a book, and I had my hands like wrapped around the book like this, just talking to him. And he comes up to me and he says, "Get out of my way," and pushes me to the ground. And when I get up, I told him he was out of line and that I was going to sue him, ha, 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 because you really can't sue anybody for that. It's just word of the wise. You can't sue cops for that kind of stuff. Anyway, so then he's told me, am I going to leave? I still had my business to do. I told him, no, I'm not going to leave. So he arrested me. And then they took me downstairs and basically tortured me because I wouldn't sign into their jail because it was an unlawful illegal arrest, as far as I could see. And so they took my clothes and tortured me. They basically down there in the cold cell. They left me in there for hours with no blanket, no clothes, nothing. And they denied me medical attention. And I wanted to see who these people were, and I wanted the public to be aware of the danger that these folks, these public servants, might pose to them. They should be on the lookout when they go down to the courthouse. So that's what sparked this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, to me, it's almost irrelevant. I mean, for the particular ruling, whether you are somebody who's listening and says, well, you should have let him search your bag, and you were being disorderly, or whatever Pierce County would say in their defense. Like, it doesn't even matter because, again, you can read the ruling, which I'll put the link for that in the description too. 33 pages, I believe, so it's not super long, but it didn't come into play at all and the charges, like you said, the charges were dropped in that case anyway, but it didn't come into play in the court ruling. I didn't, at least I didn't read, maybe I missed it, but I didn't read anything about that. All I read was their determination of your YouTube channel and then what it means.
They wouldn't, they wouldn't put that in there. That would have been embarrassing for Pierce County. It was an unlawful arrest. You know, they knew, they did all this stuff willfully because I asked a question about court security, which under Article 1, Section 10 is illegal. You know, and the judges don't want to hear that. That is their security. That's their private little army down there. So I mean, that's they're not going to work against that in any way. And I am the enemy if I speak out against it.
I did just want to add, like Allison just said, that the why of why a journalist or somebody is exercising some right should basically never be relevant, right? So like the reason that thing that this can cause in the future is actually pretty detached from the original case, right? If you were exercising your freedom of religion, like, do you really need to be worshiping, right? I once was filming the FEC building, and the cops were like, why do you have to be filming this? Like, you know, I can explain, but first of all, it shouldn't matter to you. I have a right to film on a sidewalk. Like, whatever the thing is, the journalists need not explain why they are exercising the right that they have. In order to,
the thing is, they make it up. They make it up. If you go to the Supreme Court case when it was argued, go and look, and their lawyer, their attorney is up there. He was equating me with these murders that happened in Spanaway, where these three cops got killed. And so he was conflating my asking for these records with the murder of police officers. I mean, I don't know where these people get off doing this kind of stuff. I mean, but really, that's the kind of thing. I tell you what, if I had said something like that in court, or my attorney had gone along and said something like that about Pierce County, the judge would have stopped them in their tracks and probably, sanctioned us. But they can go and say this kind of ridiculous stuff about me. I mean, really, why? Because I asked a question, because I demanded that they tell me what the law is. I mean, that really, that makes them assault me and take my freedom away. And that's okay with some people. Well, I guess I don't understand that way of thinking whatsoever. And like I said, it doesn't really matter why I'm in there or whatever. I mean, as a matter of fact, the Public Records Act says that too, that it doesn't matter why I'm asking for the records. And they're not supposed to distinguish between requesters, it says in there. Yet they put this in there. That is distinguishing amongst requesters on its face.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a good learning lesson for us, because along the way, I mean, even like the freedom of religion we've learned during COVID, it has its limitations. That's at least something I've learned over the last year, is that we walk around, and probably should have learned after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, that like there are certain things that we just think we have as freedoms that when you actually push it and do it, the government's like, oh, no, that's not really a freedom. Like, the freedom has, a lot of limitations on it that you think is really freedom. We walk around with this false sense of freedom, which, when, like I said, you exercise it, that's when you realize that, oh, maybe it wasn't a freedom after all. But to the point of, even when I was in corporate media, there were all kinds of rules even then with, if you were to take this down a notch, like to shoot video in a courtroom. Well, first off, like federal courthouses never let you shoot video in the courtroom. Why is that? I've never really quite understood that. That's why you have all those sketches that come out, because you can't bring the cameras in. But even like, I've been to other counties in Washington. I don't think I've ever shot in the Pierce County courthouse, but like Thurston County, I have to call ahead. I have to get the judge's approval. They have to talk with all these people. So it's just, and sometimes they'll say, well, it's because we have to get both attorneys on board, but that, that may not, why does that matter? Like, say I go and I want to shoot a case because I'm covering the defendant, right? I want to know, they have this case and I'm covering their argument or whatever. And then the prosecution's like, no, we don't want your video camera in here. And like, so then they don't agree to it. So I don't get to bring my camera. And then, there's all kinds of, if you're 2 minutes late, which let's talk about how often that happened in corporate news, because I'd get the assignment, late or there's traffic or whatever, I'm 2 minutes late, the judge is allowed to say, sorry, you can't bring your court. I mean, there have been multiple times where even in corporate media, I've had issues with the courts, with having the freedom to just walk into a courtroom and say, this is what's going on here, which always seemed odd to me anyway.
Well, this is the thing, and that they're breaking the law here too, the judges. Of course, every time they're supposed, if they deny you any part of the public not being able to view that case, and that means you, the journalist, they have to do a test. There's like this test that's got like several points, and they have to do a hearing to make sure that your rights aren't being violated here. But they never do that. They just violate your rights.
And that's Washington state law, what you're describing?
Yes.
This is an interesting comment. It doesn't make sense. They blast mugshots all over the news, so it's not a privacy issue. I guess I didn't really even think about that. So it's like if you're the criminal, they can put you, the news media puts you like all over the place. But we can get the criminal's information, but we can't get the government's information. That is actually kind of an interesting point.
Yeah, and there's like you always see the people, if they're accused of something, they're blasted all over the news. But if a cop or a prosecutor is accused of something, it has to be particularly heinous, and there has to be a whole lot of already attention on it before they will put their picture out.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for doing this. Any last words before we go?
Yeah, if you want to really see how corrupt the judiciary is, come on over to my channel, Liberty Champion on YouTube.
Yes, I'll have a link for that, and I'll have Ford's link too for news to share. Yeah, so we'll have all the links. All the links are going to be in the description. So definitely check it out. Ford, anything else before we go?
I would just say, I mean, I was able to offer this defense of Brian's work without having actually seen Brian's work. I mean, I think that it shows that shows how the First Amendment is sort of supposed to work. I've enjoyed having this conversation. I'm sure that there's valuable things on his channel, but even if his channel was full of like slop, it would still be worth the government respecting his right to request things the same way CNN or anybody else does. So I would challenge whoever's watching this to be prepared to defend free speech, defend press freedom, no matter who it is, even if you don't like the news outlet, even if you don't like what they say, the way they report or whatever. If you can always watch somebody else, you can always make your own media, and when you do so, you're going to want to have those press freedoms protected for you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, it seems like often when freedoms are encroached upon, they use cases or people, like say on YouTube, we've seen people lose their channels that, there's either fear or other reasons to, oh, okay, but that person's too much, without realizing, what sort of foundation you're setting for it to encroach closer to you. And that's why, I see YouTubers sometimes saying, yeah, but this person shouldn't be here. And then you're like, but what are you doing? Because and then you'll see them later. They'll complain that their video is getting suppressed. You're like, but you called for that. Like you asked for, but by pointing at somebody that you found to be repugnant and saying they should be removed, you set the foundation for your own content to be suppressed, because we're all in it together. So you really know the level at which you support freedom when you defend it for somebody who's particularly repugnant for you. That's at least the way I look at it. But neither one of you guys are repugnant for me. I really appreciate it. You're being on.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys. This is like my first professional remote live stream, and I feel like it went pretty well. So thank you to my technical director and producer for walking down to the pool area in Vegas. Hopefully my daughter is not drinking a margarita. She's a little bit too young for that. Okay, see you guys next time. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah.